It's 18 minutes after 8. You're still watching the AM show. Yesterday, we showed you the first part of a documentary put together by Adelaide Arthur and Manasseh Azere Awene. That documentary highlights the plight of girls who have been defiled and how they're working to get back on track. Here's a reminder of some of the stories shared in that documentary.
This 15-year-old girl, whom I call Alberta, opted for an all-girls senior high school. She made this choice because she grew up detesting boys and men. Alberta was defiled when she was only 6, an experience that left the little girl frightened and traumatized.
After that incident, I wasn't talking to guys. I hated them. I didn't like even my daddy. I wasn't free with my daddy. When I remember it, sometimes I feel like crying. I become so sad. It was a very terrible moment. I never thought it could happen to me.
Personal mama yam Sunday to feel the I name say me come for some nearly part me. Some bad so me to be a name. Yes, if I yapa. No, me bonama. No, me ever study. No, you me when I told him down, now he said I should stand.
You should stand?
Yes.
So you stood for how long? For a long time? Did it happen once or he did it some other time?
He continued.
And how was he doing it? Was it every month or every week?
Every day.
At the same time, or he did for one phase and the second? Tell me how it happened.
He did for one phase and another one.
Who did he start with?
He started with this.
Your elder sister?
Yes.
And what did you tell him when he was doing that?
I told him that I will not do so.
You would not do it?
Yes.
And he still did it?
Yes.
Were you crying whilst he was doing it?
Yes.
Can you also tell me what you saw?
I was sleeping on us.
When you think about what he has done to you, how do you feel?
I feel sad.
You feel sad? Why?
Because no one has done something to me like that.
These are very heartbreaking accounts there, reliving those horrible moments. And if you're a parent, if you're a big sister or a big brother, and you hear these young girls share these stories, I guess it would, I don't know, no words can express how you want to feel afterwards. But let's have a conversation on the back of this. Dr. Selassie Addom is a resident in psychiatry with the Accra Psychiatric Hospital, and she's joining us for a conversation. I'm sure that you hear some of these stories often.
Yes, we do.
Does this surprise you?
No, it doesn't, because it's something that we see. I wish we would see much less of it, but something that we see quite often.
Wow. How come parents don't get to hear of some of these things when they're ongoing?
Well, I think it's mostly because of the way it is done, because it's not only about the physical aspect of the abuse, there's also a bit of psychological abuse. So the perpetrator often threatens the victim. So with all kinds of things. So if you tell anybody else, I'll kill you, or this and this will happen to you. So often the victim is not able to tell anybody because they are afraid of the perpetrator.
Incredible. You work at the facility. How many would you say? Can we put a number to the number of children who come forward or who are referred? Is there a number to it?
It's difficult to put a number to it, but well, I would say maybe maybe in a week once. That is
Really?
Yes, one
That's
or
still...
two. Yes, and I am only one doctor in one facility, and there are other facilities. So you can imagine that there are much more. And I know Kolebu has a unit, special unit for child abuse cases. So they see a lot more, but it's quite common, much more common than a lot of people think.
Okay. You know, since you are the experts, I want us to take it from this way. Is there anything at all? Because sometimes when these things happen, we tend to blame ourselves. Is there anything psychologically that you think a child, a 6-year-old, can do or will do to attract a man forcing themselves on them?
So I'm happy you brought that up, because that's one thing that a lot of people in our society believe. And I think it's a very wrong thinking to blame the victim. And I know your documentary is about girls, but a lot of boys get abused as well. And unfortunately, because we tend to think more of the girls, a lot of the boys are not, it's not reported. So a lot of them grew up with a lot of problems because they were abused as children. And it's just wrong to think that it's the victim's fault, even if it's not a 6-year-old child and it's a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. It's never the fault of the victim. Even if it's a 20-year-old, it's never the fault of the victim. So we need to get that clear. No matter what a 6-year-old does, the child should not be abused. So it's never their fault.
If you look at the first girl who was talking about her story, she had gone on to secondary school. It had affected her relationships, and she had made up her mind to stay away from boys and that. What can that do to you, that torture, that experience?
It does a lot. So hers is just one way that it comes up. A lot of the times the abuse is not dealt with, unfortunately. So now, even though I say we see quite a few in the facility, there are lots which are still not reported. So most of the time, by the time we hear about it, it's because the person has come up with some mental health problems. And then talking to the person and looking back, we know that this is something that happened in their childhood. Can come up with behavior problems, drug abuse, depression, anxiety problems, a whole lot. It can come up with a whole lot of mental health problems if it is not properly dealt with when it happened.
So as a parent, because this is something that I would want to know when it is happening, if it is happening to my child, how do I know? Is there a way that you can help me if my child is not talking to me?
Well, I think the best way is to know your child and pick up small changes in the child's behavior. Because most of the time, like I said earlier, because of the psychological abuse that comes with the sexual abuse, the child will not be comfortable talking about it. So the best way is to pick up small things that change in the child's behavior. Sometimes too, the child talks about it in a way, but parents or guardians don't realize that this could be a problem. So there are usually small things that happen. Because a child, for example, a 6-year-old child does not know about sex unless an adult introduced them. So if a child starts behaving in a certain way,
in a way like what? Would they start, for instance, talking about the acts?
No, they might not be, but they might be acting out. So, for example, recently I saw a child whose mother said she had a report from school that the child was French kissing other children. So this is like a 3-year-old. So there is no way a 3-year-old knows how to French kiss unless something has been done to the child. So,
how about watching television and seeing it play out? Could it also?
It is possible.
Okay.
So if you know this child is not exposed to anything like that, so that is another thing. Children should not be exposed to things like that. A 3-year-old or a 4-year-old should not be exposed to things like that. So if a child is doing something like that, or even in their drawings, so that's another way we can pick, especially for young children, pick up some of the things they draw. It can raise an alarm bell, or some of the way they behave, or the way they walk. So sometimes the first thing a parent notices is that the child is walking funny or sitting in a funny way. Then it should raise, or the child says something that I don't want to go to this particular uncle, or because we know that most of the abuse is done by people the children know, especially very young children. they only trust people that they are familiar with. So if the child is refusing to go to a certain person, a certain adult, the parent should not force the child. There has to be a reason why the child is refusing to go to this person. So those are some of the things that should alert a parent. And if a teacher complains about an unusual behavior at school, it shouldn't offend the parent. You should go and ask a bit more about it. Sometimes the child will not be eating well or refuse to go to school or complaining of different symptoms. So today I have a headache or tomorrow I have a stomach ache. It should also raise an alarm bell.
Are you able to help a child who's gone through this to forget about the experience, to move on in life? Because I wish we could erase all these bad, terrible memories from these children who have shared their experiences.
I don't think that it's possible to totally forget. So what we do is to help the child to move past it and then deal with it, because it's, as you can see, it's very traumatic. And if it is not dealt with, then the risk of all the mental health problems is higher. Even when it is dealt with, it's still difficult. So it's not possible to totally forget about such a traumatic experience, but you can be helped to deal with it. So the psychological support is important when it happens, immediately after it happens. Unfortunately, most of the time we see the children after a long period of time when problems have started coming up. Yes, but if once it's dealt with, there's a better likelihood of a child living close to normal life. And I know people who have moved on with life and used it more to help people if it's been dealt with well. Yeah.
How is the feeling, or is there, so if the person who did this to the child is still living around the same environment with the child, does it have an effect? Definitely.
So it's more difficult, certainly, if you always see the person walking around free. And that's another issue with us as a society that I think we need to talk about, because we believe that the person can just be let go, you know, and for all kinds of reasons we don't want to pursue the issue to its full course, because somebody who has done something like that needs to go and face the law, because it's a criminal.
So the child
offense.
will even be reassured
exactly.
that that's bad, and that's why the person is being punished for it.
Yes. So it has to go through the legal system. But most of the time what we see is that people don't want to, especially parents and all that, for all kinds of reasons. They want to put covers over it and say, well, we'll handle it at home and that kind of thing. And I think it's also not very good for the psychological well-being of the victim, because they need to see that whatever happened to them was wrong and the person has faced the law. Because sometimes the person who has been abused also becomes an abuser if it is not dealt with properly. So we need to allow the person to face the law. Sometimes people feel that the victim will be exposed to unnecessary attention. That's one of the reasons why they don't want the issue to go through. But
we've seen some high-profile cases in Ghana where, you know, they start and the case just it goes back.
Yes, it's hidden, and it's not really good for the victim. So it has to go through the process, and there are ways of protecting the victim. So if they are afraid of that, there are ways. The legal system, they have ways of doing it such that the victim is not given too much unnecessary exposure, so that the person who committed the crime would face the law.
This is one experience that I guess people can easily say, oh, no parent should ever go through this. But the reality is that some parent would go through this. So if you just realize that your child has been abused, you are the expert, what should you do?
So once you find out, the first thing is to go to a hospital, because there's a lot that has to be done immediately. So for us, at the psychological part of the issue, the physical part is very important. So we need to make sure that the child has no injuries or doesn't have any infections. Most of the time, those are present. So they have to be treated first. So we have to make sure the child has not been exposed to any infection. If the infection is there, they treat it. If the child has any injuries, they have to be treated. And then they have to send the child for a psychological care, so they have to see a psychologist, and then that aspect will also be dealt with. It takes a bit of time, so the child may have to see a psychologist for a few months whilst this thing, and then we have to go through the legal aspect too. So once the parent sees that, they have to report the matter to the police and let the perpetrator be dealt with from the point of the law. Because leaving the person in the community, like I said, most of the people who commit these crimes are very close to the child, especially very young children. As you can see, they can only trust people who are very close. Yeah. So those are the first steps. Once they go through those, then take it from there.
Is there anything from the early reporting, the stages that you've talked about, is there anything that is preserved there that can help the legal case?
Well, definitely. So most of the time we do a lot of documentation. Once the victim comes to the hospital, there's a way to document, and there are tests to do that can show what has happened. And once all that has been documented, usually the police will request for a letter, a medical report from the doctors, and then we send the report, which helps in the process. Yeah.
Amazing. This is back home, because you take the child to the hospital, but back home, what's the kind of support the parent can give to a child like that?
So the most important thing is what I've mentioned before. So never blame the victim. Okay. So most of the time what happens is that you're a bad girl. What were you doing in Uncle so and so's room? And why do you do? I've always warned you not to go do this and do that. It's totally unnecessary, because it just makes the child feel like it's their fault. Whilst it's not their fault, no matter what a child does, the child should not be taken advantage of. So you just have to support the child. It's not their fault. Sympathize with them. Let them understand that you are going to help them to move on. So there's nothing like it's their fault. That's the most common thing people do, it's your fault. But it's not the child's fault at all.
I want us to, and we're going to put our WhatsApp, it's not a WhatsApp number, but it's the number that you can also send a text message to me if you want to, ask Dr. Salasi Addom a question, or if you want to comment on the subject that we're discussing. Just send me a text message, and I can also activate the phone lines. Maybe we can talk for a couple of minutes. 0302-211-6910, 0302-211-69102. You can give us a call if there's any support at all that you want. And then, from the community, because once you make this, you go to the hospital, the police station. If you live in a small community, then everybody kind of knows what has happened. What should you do? Because obviously people will be talking about it. People will be talking about your child. People will be talking about what has happened in your home and what your child has been up to.
Yeah, so it's the same thing applies to the community as well. The issue of the blame and always blaming the victim, and also not exposing the victim to unnecessary, talk and exposure. So this is more for the family. So as much as possible, it has to be something that will be dealt with at the level of the family, and not talking so much about it within the community. I know most of the time it goes out even before the family realizes what is going on. But as much as possible, it's not more about this child is a bad girl, she's done this, or this boy is a bad boy. It's just to provide support for the child, and then understand that this is not their fault. It's a very traumatic experience. So the more people talk about it and go on and on about the worse it is for the child. And I think sometimes that's the reason why some of them want to withdraw the issue from the courts. But it doesn't help the victim in the long run. So just to be there for the person, not always talking about it and always going on and on, it doesn't really help. I think sometimes the media also should, sometimes it's just making so much, this person, and it makes the person feel worse, I think. So sometimes it's better to just keep it on the low, and then let the family be there to provide support for the person, especially when it is high profile. I think that's when it becomes so much of a whole media something. So the victims themselves don't feel comfortable continuing with the the case. Yes.
Should you relocate from the community?
Well, if it is possible, that will be good for the victim. But the issue should continue. You know, sometimes the relocation just ends everything, and that is also not very good, because it's not an escape. It has to be dealt with. So if you escape and go and live somewhere else, it doesn't wipe away the pain and the stress of the victim. So if you...
But you know, sometimes the case can take such a long time.
Yes.
And so sometimes you're like, okay, it looks like we've even moved on, and this case is still lingering on. Why don't we just let go?
So who has moved on? That's the question. So maybe the family has moved on, but the victim doesn't just move on.
Would justice allow the child or the victim to move on?
Not necessarily. It's part of the process. So it doesn't mean that once the perpetrator has been put in jail, the person will move on. Not really. But it helps in the process. It helps the person understand that this is wrong. The person is behind bars, and then I'm also getting the help that I need. So the psychological help is very important. So it doesn't end at just treating all the injuries and then making sure the person is looking physically well. But the person has to get psychological help.
What kind of, because I want to believe that sometimes children like this would share this kind of experience with outsiders, with a reporter, but their real parents or guardians may not know. Yeah. How do you begin to start a conversation? Say you're just trying to see if there's anything like that with your child that you don't know. How do you begin the conversation?
So I think the important thing is to have the relationship already there. So if the relationship is not there already, it will be difficult to even bring up the issue of what has been happening to you in school. So if you are not able to talk about what did you eat for lunch in school and what friends you have, then how are you going to talk about who did this to you and who did this to you? So like I said, you have to know your child. And also, I was going to come to that later, but the prevention is important for something as traumatic as that. So we need to be alert to the fact that these things happen, and then talk to our children about it right from an early age. So right now we know that from as early as 2 years old, you need to teach your child how to take care of themselves.
Okay, we'll continue with that. Let's just speak to Anthony Sando, who's joining us from East Legon, and then we'll come back to that. Anthony, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. How are you?
Hello, Anthony?
Yeah. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. We can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, my contribution is that I'm a parent, and I think one factor that contributes to the problem is about, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, Anthony.
I'm saying that one factor contributing to that problem is the family system. We make the children trust almost everybody that is around them, which is not the best. It does not help. For instance, I have children. I have boys and girls, and in fact, my eyes go with them everywhere. I don't even allow my girls, even though they are the same parents, I don't allow the boys to mingle so much with the girls, because they are human beings and anything can happen. Sometimes what you don't expect can happen among even the brothers and sisters. So it is some of the things that parents have to know, so that we keep our eyes on the children.
Okay.
Uncles, like you said, the uncles and every relative that is around. It should just be from the scratch. We should let the children respect people around them, but they should not just trust people wholeheartedly like that.
Okay.
So I think it's one key problem. Also, where the children go. Sometimes it depends on where the abuse takes place. So that kind of security should be taught to the children as early as possible.
Okay. All right. Anthony, thank you very much for sharing. That's Anthony there. Here's Delassie Divine in Palugu, Bogatanga says, please advise parents never to accept settlement in terms of heinous crimes like defilement and rape. Thanks for that message. Okay, so we were on something before Anthony came into the midst.
Yeah, so I was talking about the prevention, because you were asking how do you even begin to talk about it. So right from the age of 2, we know that you need to teach the child how to take care of themselves. So teach them that some area, parts of their body is private. So you have to teach a child that this is private, nobody should touch it. And you teach the child in simple language, and you keep teaching until the child understands. And once you start that, you would see that the child will learn. For example, you teach a child that nobody should kiss the child on the lips, you know, and the child knows that it's not supposed to be done. If anybody wants to kiss the child, it has to be on their forehead or on their cheek. Simple things like that from a very young age, such that when there is a change from what they know as normal, they know how to report to you. So they have to learn right from there. And like Anthony was saying, you have to put measures in place. You know, now some people are even saying that this thing of calling uncle and auntie, it also exposes, because so long as the person is not the child's relative, even the relatives are doing it. So the child must know that it's not everybody who is uncle and not everybody who is auntie. This person is Mr. Mensa, Mr. So and so. Uncle is only uncle. And then you keep an eye on uncle, because uncle too can be the perpetuator.
Thank you for that. Because we say everybody's uncle and everybody's auntie. We don't mention their real names. Let's listen to Camillus Ghana from Jirapa, who joins us via phone. Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, hi. Good morning, sir. Let's hear you. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please, you're on air. Go ahead.
Yes. What I have is that, you know, when children are going out, we don't ask where they are going to. Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can. And you've got to turn down the volume on your television sets. The other voice you're hearing is from your TV, so please turn down the volume on your television set. I'll come to you, Prince, Kamari and Tamale, if you're ready. Camillus, just hold on for me.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can hear you.
All right, let's work with this. Please go ahead.
Yes, I think parents have for some time relaxed with this issue of caretaking, so much so that when children say they are going out, you don't ask to know where they are going to. You can say you are going to Uncle so-and-so or Brother so-and-so, and before you realize that the child has gone to a different place. What the child wears out, parents are not so much caring about it. Somebody wears something and then you say it's fashion. You see, we are human beings. Even a dad sees the child and admires the child. You see, all these things happen, and then before you realize, the child is into it, or the dad is into it. And until we start taking care of some of these things, they will continue to happen.
All right.
Child abuse, child defilement, they will continue to happen.
Okay.
The human being is a sexual being.
Camillus, thank you very much. I think your point is well made. Prince in Tamale. Prince, good morning.
Good morning. I want to contribute to your program, please.
Please do.
I think on the issue of defilement, it's high time Ghanaian parents understand that you don't trust anybody within your neighborhood, especially when you have a female kid. It's very common you see our Ghanaian parents allow our kids to go to anybody within the neighborhood, especially, you know, when they are busy with their daily activities, they leave their kids to uncles and, you know, people they think maybe can help take care of them. But the fact is that you can't always trust anybody, especially when you have a female kid who is within the age of 6 to 15. You don't leave those kids to anybody around. It's very dangerous. And then there's also a practice I have realized. You just see that when you have your neighbors around, and maybe once in a while they come to visit, you hear most of them say, oh, this is my wife. When the kid is around 6 or 8 to 15 years, the parents sit up and whoever is calling that the kid to wife at night is to stop. Because when you allow this to happen, that's the kid. She doesn't even know what's going on. So it will fit in her head. So anytime I you are around and the person, the kid or the devil can, you know, come in and anything can happen. So
Sure.
It's an issue that we really need to fight.
All right.
Don't allow anybody to call your daughter your wife when you don't really know anything about that. And
Very important point you make there. Prince from Tamale, thank you very much. Our final caller, Montari from Fofoso. Montari, good morning.
Good morning, madam.
Yes, sir. Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Please go ahead.
Yes. Yes. Yes, good morning. Madam, sometimes what causes the problem is, the kind of dressing the children normally put on.
Montari, explain. But you have to turn down the volume on your television set, and let's go ahead. I want you to tell me how a 6-year-old can dress to attract a man.
Sometimes, this kind of their dresses, the way they dress them, the mothers, our parents normally do for their children, it's not good. To be precise, I have one in the house. But the kind of dressing the mother normally puts on for the child to be dressing, it's not good.
Does it attract you?
They are very attractive.
To you?
Not to me as such, but someone else.
All right.
We minds, our minds are different.
All right, Montari, good to know. Thanks for joining us. That will be it for the phone calls. You've been listening, so I'll give you the opportunity if you want to comment on any of the things you've heard. I am surprised by Montari's.
By the last
yes,
caller.
exactly.
Yes. Well, I'm not surprised because
Okay.
I know, like I told you before, that's the common perception that we come up to most of the time. That is because the child, and unfortunately a lot of the victims believe this, that it is because of something they have done. But it's totally not true, just like your reaction to his submission. So it can't be that a 6-year-old will wear anything that will attract them.
What if that was your own child?
Well,
if you're
unfortunately,
because I'm looking and I want to ask a man that question. If that was your own child, would you be attracted by the same? If the child was to dress the same, and it was your own child, be attracted by her?
The truth is, unfortunately, we have men who are attracted
It's
to
a
their
shame, actually.
own children.
Yeah, it's a shame.
So it's not surprising that people think that way, but it's something we need to start changing.
Can I twist the question? Could there be some kind of psychological problem with men who do this?
Definitely. So I was going to come to that. So like I said before, as part of the management of all this, we need to go through the legal system. And sometimes the perpetrators end up coming back to us because it's been seen that they have a problem. So it's not only helping the victim. In the long run, maybe he might also get some help, or she, because sometimes the abusers are females.
But with your
well.
experience, do they usually have a problem too?
Oh yes, somebody
because
who
sometimes
is.
You won't believe that they actually have a problem. You realize that, or they need that.
Well, maybe it's the way you see mental health problems. So there are different kinds. There are the ones that they need a help is there, but there is a problem. So there are different kinds of mental health problems. So the person may have a problem, and then as they go through the legal system, the person may come back to us and then require some help. So it's not only about the victim, and helping one victim may prevent other victims from being abused by the same person. Once the person goes through the system, goes through the mental health system, and then ends up maybe in jail or whatever it is. So it's good to go through the process.
Yeah. Let's end on this note, because you've said something to me that I haven't taken notice of myself. Don't let your child call every grown-up uncle or auntie. That's crucial, because we do that, and I do that as well.
Yes, so we think it's a sign of respect, especially in our African society. But we've realized that it's actually one of the ways where it's making the children more vulnerable to because it makes the person feel familiar.
Auntie is family.
Yes, so it makes the person feel familiar. Okay, this person is auntie, so I can be comfortable with auntie. Or uncle is family, so I can be comfortable with uncle. So it's better to say, oh, this is Mr. Ajua, go and greet Mr. Mensa or Mr. Sam, so and so. It's better that way. Even our domestic helps, all those people who come and weed for us and clean our houses for us, all those people, it's better to call them by their first name. And somebody made an important point that I wanted to mention about my wife, my husband. I think it's better to just stop. The parents should stop the person right there. There's nothing like an adult calling a 6-year-old my wife. It's not right, because it also creates this idea of familiarity in the mind of the child, so that the child will think, oh, this person is, my husband. It's not supposed to be like that. So the parents must stop whichever adult. Oh no, my child is not your wife. She's not there yet. And the child must hear that mommy has stopped uncle so and so right there. So that this thing of familiarity is not there. Because even uncles abuse children.
As in real
so we need to,
family members.
Yes, we need to limit the number of uncles and aunties a child has, so that they are not too exposed to all these things. Yeah.
I know I said finally, but this will be the final thing. By showing people sharing their own stories, would that trigger, can that prompt another child in the home to open up?
Not necessarily. It will just make the child know that other people have similar experiences. But like I said, there's a lot of psychological abuse going on. So the person thinks, if I say it, this uncle will kill me, or so there's always the threat aspect that is making the child very much afraid of speaking out, because they think that the person can do it, actually kill them.
Okay, all right. I guess, it's good that we've had this conversation. There's a second part of that documentary that will show this evening, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
That's Dr. Selassie Addom, who is a resident in psychiatry with the Accra Psychiatric Hospital. That will be it for this conversation. But join Adelaide Arthur and Manasseh Azure Awene this evening, and let's all watch and learn from the lessons from the second part of that documentary.